Hello there, I'm Nigel.
Hi, I'm Kerry.
This is our YouTube channel, Be the Alternative. Welcome to another video in the series Common Outreach Questions, where we ask each other a question that we've had when we were doing street activism outreach that we have
Had a million times.
been asked in a million different ways. I'll share my answer, Kerry will share her answer. Might not be the best answers, but they're the answers that we have designed, evolved over the years, and see what you think. If you've got a different answer, a better answer, down below. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to ask about the cheese, though. So quite often you'll get someone who's vegetarian, for example, and say, "Oh, but I could never give up cheese." So how would you answer that?
Say that once upon a time I was vegetarian. I was vegetarian for over 12 years before I actually went vegan. And my favourite thing in the world was cheese as well. And it was the thing I immediately thought about long before I even knew what veganism was. It's just this new word that I didn't really have any concept of what it meant. It was just these were these strange people that didn't eat cheese or any kind of animal products, and I didn't understand why, because when I was a vegetarian I still believed that cows produce milk naturally. They didn't have to be pregnant, which is, I think there's two different types of vegetarians. I think there's people that are now aware of it, and they still choose to consume milk and cheese and things, or there's people that are still very much in the dark about it. It's less likely because of the amount of impact that we've had over the past few years. But either way, I like to share my story, because I think if they know that you were once vegetarian, that they're a lot more empathetic and a lot more open to listening to you. So, I just say that I was vegetarian when I was a teenager, and that it was the number one thing that I thought I would miss when I thought about actually going vegan, once I learned about the dairy industry. And I'll admit, the first couple of weeks when I went vegan, I did miss cheese. I went vegan overnight, but back then it was 2017, and there wasn't any knowledge in my head about vegan cheese alternatives. I didn't know that there was such
I think
a thing.
Alternatives weren't as nice back then as well.
No, they weren't as nice. The original Biolife I really didn't like, but the Epic Mature, if you haven't tried it, then do. But
I don't like cheese. Even vegan cheese. Anyway, sorry.
But yeah, that's generally what I try and say. I go through my journey, and just say, I had no idea when I first went vegan what to eat. I genuinely thought I would miss cheese. My favourite food in the world was cheesy pasta bake. And fortunately, my mum was really supportive, and she was on Tesco the very next day, and she was looking through all these different alternatives for me. And as I say, the first couple that I tried, they weren't great. They really weren't great, but things have changed an awful lot in the last 5-6 years. And there's some really amazing ones. And then something that we tend to do is we have a little booklet, happens to be here actually. We didn't plan this, it's just on the desk because we're messy. And we've made a booklet to show people what you can have dairy free. So I think it's nice to have a visual representation of all the things that they can still eat that are vegan, because people generally think, oh, I'll be giving that up. And it's not the case. You're just simply swapping for an alternative. So, yeah, that's what I like to say.
Yeah, I think
everything you can eat as a vegetarian, I can eat as a vegan. I'm just not contributing to the cruelty of animals.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I think, as I indicated or hinted at a few moments ago, I've never been a cheese lover. So it's, I'm free. Yeah. But I'm honest about that. When I'm talking to people, I say, look, I'm going to be honest. Even before I was vegetarian, I was never a cheese lover. But I do say, I think one of the important things is, especially when you're talking to a vegetarian, is I was vegetarian for 32 years before I went vegan 8 years ago. My biggest regret in life is not going vegan the day I went vegetarian, because I went all the same reasons I went vegetarian, the same reasons I went vegan. I think a lot of people are not aware of the fact that it's normally cows. I know you can get milk from sheep and goats and things, but it's normally cows. I think a lot of people don't really think it through that the mother has to have been pregnant to give milk.
So many people now still think a cow eats grass, that's how she
Exactly.
grows. My mum grew up on a farm, and that's still what she believed until she was in her 40s, because that's what my granddad told her.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago I was talking to 3 girls. They late teens, early 20s. And I'm going to say late teens. And I was talking to them, and they just hadn't even realised that it was only the females that give milk. It was that cows give milk. That they hadn't realised that it's only the females that give milk. And not only that, they didn't realise that they had to have been mothers to give milk. When I talk about cheese, I've not personally had the problem about loving cheese and not being able to give it up. But I think really you've got to look at it from the victim's perspective. When you see the suffering that the mothers go through and the calves that are taken away from their mothers and the artificial insemination and all that sort of stuff, just for your taste pleasures. Now, I get that you love cheese. I get that people really love cheese. If you love cheese, you love cheese. If you don't like it like me, then it's not a big deal. But if you really love cheese, and I still, despite what you just said, I think there are a lot of vegan alternatives that are really good, but I get the impression, and I don't know, but I get the impression that it's still not quite as good. If we're being ultra honest, I don't think it's quite as good as dairy cheese.
I couldn't eat dairy cheese now.
No, you couldn't, but I still think some people strongly feel that they might miss that. But you're thinking it in the wrong terms. You need to think about the victim. Think about the mother who's lost her baby, who's been made pregnant year on year on year until her milk yield starts to dwindle, and then she's sent to slaughter. If you think about it in those terms, it's are your taste pleasures more important? We say this all the time, don't we? Are your taste pleasures more important than the suffering of an animal? And the answer's got to be no.
Some people still answer yes, and invariably, if that's the way your outreach goes, that's the way your outreach goes. It's not the fact that you're a poor outreacher. I mean, we've all got things to learn, but people like that who want, for a better word, that are that selfish that they don't want to consider others. You're not going to get very far.
Yeah. But going back to vegetarians specifically, because like you say, a lot of vegetarians will say, I can't give up my cheese. But again, I use you as an example. I use myself as an example, and I use pretty much every vegan. I'm going to say not pretty much every vegan. Every vegan I've ever met always regrets not going vegan sooner. I always leave a conversation with a vegetarian and a lot of meat eaters as well, but especially vegetarians, as I always say. After this conversation, you might not go away vegan. You might not go be vegan tonight. You might think about it. In 2 weeks' time, you might go vegan, or 2 years' time, or 20 years' time. But whenever you do go vegan, even if it's 20 years' time, the day you go vegan, you'll think, why the heck didn't I go vegan sooner? When I met those weird guys that were that nutter that was going on at me in the street when we had that conversation, why didn't I go vegan that night? You will regret it, I promise you. If you're a vegetarian and not yet vegan, you will go vegan and you will regret not going vegan sooner.
And the other thing to remember is it obviously depends on whether you've had an outreach session where you're already showing footage of what's happening to animals. That's very important, because if they've seen the footage, then hopefully it'll have been in the narration that you're showing actually what goes on in the dairy industries. But if they haven't had exposure to any kind of footage, you have to have the knowledge of what happens in the dairy industry in your head. I mean, a lot of people will say you don't need the facts and figures, and you don't need the facts and figures, but if you're going to do activism, you need to know the very basics of what's happening. So the fact that the males are taken away just hours after birth and bludgeoned or shot, and you need to know that they obviously don't produce milk. Naturally, you're going to know that as a vegan anyway, but that their female babies are going to be put on formula, a weak formula, that they're going to be wrenched away, and they're going to go through the same cycle of being inseminated and then just having babies and being inseminated again before she's eventually taken off for slaughter when she's exhausted and grief-stricken. You need to know that, because so many people still don't know what happens in the dairy industries, and you have to explain that. You have to explain the reality behind what they're consuming.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, that's raised another thing that I quite often talk about. If it's a woman of an age who could be a mother, I quite often ask her, I says, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you a mother? And if they say yes, then I talk to them directly. If they say no, they say, I'll spin it a little bit and say, has your mother ever told you about when she was pregnant or when you were pregnant? Towards the end of the pregnancy, how did you feel? Or how did your mum say she felt? And they always say, absolutely naked. Couldn't wait to give birth because I was really tired. And I say, the cows will feel exactly the same. They're pregnant for around about 9 months, which is the same as a human, and they're shattered. They give birth, and
then they're inseminated again.
Then they're inseminated again within 3 months, I think it is. Yeah. But they have their babies still. So how would you like being pregnant?
Constant cycle of pregnancy and grief.
Yeah.
And it's important to tell people about that. And again, if another angle you can take is, I know we're fundamentally about the animals, but people get disgusted by this when you tell them that, as many women know who've had children or just in general in life, mastitis is incredibly painful. And virtually all dairy cows are riddled with it, especially if you buy organic milk. As far as I'm aware, farmers can't actually treat the mastitis because they can't give them antibiotics, because that defeats the point of being organic. So they're suffering, and we're going to end up with their pus. We're going to end up drinking their pus. It's vile. People don't like to think about that they're consuming that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. I can't remember the figure now, but the if you look on the government website, is it DEFRA, the website? It tells you there's a legal limit to the amount of pus cells.
Quarter of a teaspoon, I think.
In every litre of milk. So legally, there's a threshold that you can have so many pus cells per litre.
I'm not sure if that's changed in the UK. That might still be relevant.
Yeah,
in
we
the
need
US.
to look that up. We'll look that up and we'll put a comment in the video below to a link to that. But yeah, but there used to be a legal limit to how many pus cells.
And you're consuming antibiotics if you don't buy organic. I mean, you're losing either way. If you buy organic, then you're consuming more pus. If you buy the standard stuff, you're going to be consuming antibiotics. You're going to be growing more antibiotic resistance. There's all these points to make when you're talking about the dairy industry. So we've gone from, but what about cheese, to potentially, think about the animals, think about your health, and you can. It's endless. You could go on and talk about the destruction of the Amazon rainforest primarily for cattle, and if she is a mother, then she's going to be concerned about the future of her children, and you can go down endless routes, but we'll cover those more.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you for that. If you enjoyed that discussion, then please like, share, and
subscribe.
Should we say something else? Okay. Bye.